technically. They would get more where you wouldn't get caught and stay in the Earth's proximity. And so then they would consider that boundary of the atmosphere technically. So it all depends on who you're talking to and how they prefer uh, to define things. But that doesn't change the reality.
Well, how do I
There's
know what the
lots of
reality is? You guys can't tell me. Where does space start, dude?
I mean, unless science is subjective now. Is that what we're doing?
How can I test your claim if you can't tell me what the claim is? Where does space start?
What? How can you test my claim
if you can't tell me what the claim is?
I'm not trying to make a claim. I'm just having a conversation with you. So you're thinking you're in a debate with me right now, or what?
No. Do you understand that? Like, you have a belief, and in order to test whether or not that belief is true, like if your belief is correct, I want to know, right?
Oh yeah, it'd be awesome, right, for you to have that epiphany and realize, oh wow, the universe is huge and amazing. So yeah, I'm glad you conceded that. You would like to learn that. You'd like to learn the truth.
That was a good one. So where does space start?
Like again, it probably depends on who you're talking to, and really, I would like to go back and learn how, at the beginning of the 20th century, in that time period when rocketry was really gaining steam, when the term space was starting to be used and how they used it and how that kind of changed over time as more was learned. So that would be an interesting topic to study. As for where I think it starts, I think it starts when you get into the very low percentage of the amount of air. So like if you get down below 1% of, sea level air, sea level pressure, I would consider that, yeah, you're pretty much in space at that point. But that's kind of how I conceptualize it. But again, it's just a matter of how you want to define something. So there's a gradient, as so many things are, but we also have to communicate what these things are to each other, and we have to develop terminology, and then we have to define that terminology. And so when you're talking about things that have gradient to them, you have to choose some kind of criterion, and that would probably vary from whatever circle of friends you're in, or scientists. So
it's a really long answer. You didn't even answer it though, bro. Like this isn't just about arbitrarily determining anything. Like at some point in time, either the air is still being held in a circle or sphere around the Earth, or it's not. Like at some point in time, some distance away, the air is no longer being held to the Earth. It isn't like an arbitrary thing. Does it go out infinitely? Does it stretch out to the edge of the visible universe 46 billion light years away? Is the Earth's atmosphere all the way out to the visible universe? Well, obviously not, right? Because even when it gets out closer to the sun's gravity is way stronger. So there would be a place that the Earth's atmosphere ends and outer space begins.
Again, there's a lot of factors, and there's a lot of ways in which a particle can travel with the Earth and stay in sync with it and be, in that sense, a part of its system. Like there's Lagrange points out there in an orbit, and you've read of that because you're well read. And at those points, things are relatively stable, and they will travel in or they would be in sync with that planet as it goes around.
All right, I got one more question for you. I'm going to fall back because this always happens. I got one question for you.
What always happens?
I end up talking too much. Can you still man the flat earthers' argument against your model's claim of outer space?
Thank you for that question, because I do want to give that an honest answer. So that means that I need to come up with my best argument for the flat Earth against the globe Earth. Am I hearing you right?
Well, no. So okay. If I was to say, can you still man a flat Earth then you could do that. I'm saying the flat earthers argument, right? So there's either you still man a different argument or you still man the best that you can come up with from that paradigm. Normally you would be correct that you just still man, meaning the best you can come up with. And you can do that if you want, but this one, every flat earther has the same argument. Like I've never met one that doesn't, right? But sure, whichever one you want to do, it doesn't matter. But like, can you give us a still man of the argument about the atmosphere and your claim of outer space? Like, what's the still man of why, like, the falsification of that claim?
Oh, okay. So if I was trying to falsify my claim, what argument would I use? What I think is the best argument?
Stillman specifically, yeah, like the Earth is a ball with an atmosphere around it inside of a vacuum of 10 to the negative 17 torr called outer space. Like what's the Stillman of the side that says that isn't true?
Well, I do concede that in a lot of these flat Earth arguments, and so probably the best one would be the way rockets seem to level off and plummet towards the ocean from a person's point of view. So in a child's eyes, and you've seen those videos, Daddy, something's wrong, that rocket's plummeting into the ocean. So the best steel man, I think, is that initial that first
trajectory
impression you get through your senses when you're looking at certain things like the horizon, like the trajectory of that rocket. Oh, that's not going to space, that's leveling off. Like, yeah, I see that argument and I can see why it's persuasive to.
That's not a stillman, man. Like everyone knows the answers because it would just look like that due to perspective because it's supposedly going around a ball.
Oh, like I'm sorry. I really tried my best at a steel man. Don't get me wrong.
Well, that's why I did this exercise to show everyone that like you can't even still man the flat Earth. Like most globers can't. Like you can't even still man the argument about why we say outer space in your model as is defined is impossible.
They don't listen
to do with rockets.
I honestly
they don't
cannot
listen to us when we talk.
They literally don't. They only hear flat Earth arguments when it's coming from another person claiming to debunk flat Earth. And I figured this out. So the only way that these globe earthers know the flat Earth arguments is from MC Tune or FTFE or like literally, bro. They don't listen to them from us. MC Tune tells them what we said and they believe that's what the argument is. And then they hear what's wrong with it because they can only receive it when it's simultaneously coupled with a claimed like rebuttal or refutation. Right. It's a very interesting psychological phenomenon. Of course, you don't think the Earth's flat. You don't even know what the argument is yet, right? So, like,
and the short answer, Jonathan, is entropy. The reason why you can't have outer space is because of the second law of thermodynamics. That's literally all you had to say, dude.
Yeah, like this is my favorite exercise now. I do this now all the time. I found out none of them can do it with any of the points. None of them.
So, Winston, can you, for the audience that may not know the terminology, can you highlight the difference between a steel man and a straw man?
Yeah, sure. So, if you're in a debate or whatever, and there's the other side of the argument, if you're to straw man their argument, you obviously misrepresent their actual position to make it easier to falsify. So you present like a false version of their argument so you can beat it up, right? Like so you can show why it's wrong and then claim that you're refuting their argument, even though you're actually refuting a made up argument that's not actually theirs. It's a straw man. It's not actually them. It's like a straw man of them. Kind of like your straw man ID. And then a still man would be to take their position and formulate it the most accurately and the strongest that you can. And then there's a side note, you can also just still man an idea. So it's like, I do that with the globalast. Still man meaning, well, most of you guys don't even do this good, but if I was going to explain the dark matter problem, I would invoke superfluidity. It would have no resistance to flow, et cetera, et cetera. That would explain the dark matter falsification of sigma 5 because there was no viscosity when the dark matter halos is a superfluid, then it wouldn't have viscosity. Random example, but there's that version of a still man, like just still man the best that the other side can come up with, even if it's not a specific person. or argument, because that way you can be confident that your position's correct. And then there's like the in a debate with someone else, and there's like the still man and the straw man of their argument, right? That was a lot, but yeah, obviously one is misrepresenting the side to make it easier to show why it's wrong, and then the still man is like accurately representing it the best that you can.
So
That
I
was
have a question about
perfect.
that.
Just real quick. And the reason why this is so important, guys, is because you'll go ahead and you may see something that Witsit posts, or you may see something that Proud posts, or someone else up here that they post, and you'll see someone in the mentions trying to argue against it. But if they don't even understand the information that we're putting out, then how are you going to engage in an intellectual conversation? How is that person going to refute the position if they don't understand the position? So this is why we ask, hey, can you steel man our argument? Can you please create a baseline to let us know that you understand where we're coming from, so that way we can build on this conversation? Because if you don't understand it, you can't argue against it. And then we're just
Yeah.
going to have this circular, like pointless back and forth.
Yeah, like,
So
or let me
that's
say
why
one
it's
more thing
important.
about that. Like, this is important in all aspects of life, bro. Okay. Like, if you're trying to figure out truth and you're trying to determine what the answer is to something, you need to fully understand both sides to be able to actually have justification for your conclusion. You cannot have a justified conclusion if you don't thoroughly understand both sides, which is, of course, why you see that every flat earther, for the most part, can very accurately represent the globe model and know way more about it than the general public. And that's why we know it's wrong. So this is important for all walks of life, bro, right? Like, you need to be able to do that to come to a logical conclusion. There's a famous quote about it, but I would butcher it. But basically, you can't truly be confident or claim any type of justification for your conclusion unless you can adequately and thoroughly represent and argue both sides.
And this is why I constantly say, when you guys are doing the research on the things that we're saying, right? Because we don't say blindly believe what we're talking about. We say, go look it up. Go do your own due diligence. But don't just look up your bias. Look up both sides, so that way you can be educated or intellectually honest about the things that you're absorbing. Because if you're only looking at one side, you're not going to be able to understand fully, what the conversation is about. So please do your due diligence on both sides of the argument, so that way you can be well informed, so you can speak about it articulately and intelligently. We say that all the time. So if you're only doing half the work, you're going to have half an argument or a weak foundation, and then the conversation is pointless. Thank you for that, Wiz. I appreciate that. Jonathan, I'll let you respond real quick, but then I want to go to Sheepdog, and then I will go over to Pride.
Thank you. So I don't know if Witsit, you were trying to lump me in with a group of people that don't hear any of you unless it's coming from another glober. I don't know if you were trying to imply that of me. Obviously, I'm here, and I'm here fairly regularly. And honestly, I do want to get a better and better sense of how you guys think about this, how you argue it. I just now learned from Sheepdog that you believe that entropy would be the best argument against the atmosphere clinging to the surface of a planet. And so, thank you, Sheepdog. I just wanted to clear my name there for a second. And I think that's all I have to say at the moment. I know there was more that was on my mind, but I'll give.
Well, let me clarify, since you're asking. I don't know you personally. I'm speaking in general terms, but I know that you've listened to some people debunk flat Earth before. Like, assuredly, you listened to someone on YouTube or whatever. And I'm just saying that from my experience, because you being here every week or something means nothing. I have anti-flat earthers that stalk my content, and they're the most devoted listeners, and they're in every single live stream, on every single social media post, on every single debate, and they'll probably be listening to this. But they still, if you ask them, can you still man a sunset on a flat earth? They can't do it. So I'm not saying you can or cannot. I'm just making the point that there's some psychological thing, and it's called cognitive dissonance, where it's like, unless the flat earth argument is being given to someone with with the rebuttal, like with the explanation of why it's wrong, then people don't seem to be able to receive it. They have this bias. They assume the flat earth there must be misunderstanding and not understanding their own point or whatever. But it was just a general point, man, because I think, do you agree with the logic that in order to be justified in your conclusion, then you should have an adequate understanding of both sides?
That strikes me a little odd, because if you have a correct understanding of something and you're assured of that based on the corroboration of extensive data, and it's always right on the money, and it's confirming that theory that you had, then you're in a good stand. Now, to have that does not really require you to know every single theory of every single other school of thought out there in the world, including large groups of people and very small groups. I mean, what can you clarify a little bit?
Sure, you have to be able to logically rationalize any decision. So if I'm going to be an atheist, I need to also be able to have thoroughly considered the logic and reason and the idea that there was an intelligent designer. For me to just say that there's no creator, but I've never thought of it logically, the implications, and then I like looked at exactly which side has the better position, then your atheism is really an unjustified position. It goes like that with everything. If I have not considered the atheistic position, then me just kind of blindly believing that there's a creator would be unjustified, right? But so, like in my position, I can still, man, this is what I would say, I can still man the best atheist argument that could ever exist, and then I can destroy it. That's why I am a creationist. Okay. This is just it's a basic logical principle since the beginning of time. You know, you need to be able to that shows an understanding of the subject, and that is the prerequisite to a justified conclusion, right? Because if you just hear one side of the story, I mean, you know, if I tell you your girl is cheating on you, and then she tells you that she's not, and I'm like, well, I got the evidence she is, and then you only listen to her tell you how she was at her mom's playing video games with her little brother, and I'm like, no, I got a video. She's at the club. She left with dude. Check her location, but you don't even listen to that. You don't look at the video. You don't check her location, and you believe that she's really being loyal, right? You wouldn't have a justified conclusion because you shut off the other side of the information. You would never know, right? That's the point.
Okay. In the case of the atmosphere, it's a little different because you don't have that video footage in the bar of any kind of large scale, to scale experiment where you say, okay, I have this mass that's massive enough to do the thing that I'm postulating or describing to you about what those molecules are doing. And
Neither do
so
you.
you and I
Oh no, is he
would both
describing the
then be
downfall of his
talking about
own
our
belief?
theories or our concepts, how we think about them in our head, since neither of us can really blow ourselves up to the size of God and just do that at scale using just gravity. See what I'm saying? So it's not really like that, in my opinion.
You would still need to inform yourself. It doesn't have to be a video. You still need to, first of all, in that specific scenario, we can show you a physical demonstration of gas pressure requiring containment. And as soon as you remove it, it equalizes. The second law of thermodynamics says that all natural and spontaneous systems will seek equilibrium, and entropy will increase and the amount of usable energy will decrease. And it's one of the most unquestionable natural laws that exist. It actually has the reputation of atheism as well, by the way. But so we can demonstrate that, of course, the necessary antecedent to gas pressure is physical containment. There's another claim on the table that's like, oh, well, gravity is acting as the container. And even though you normally need a physical container, this is the exception. And I can't demonstrate it because the scale is something that's unfalsifiable. So I'm saying even
and
if
you
that's the
can't
case,
demonstrate it,
I
and
can
you can't disprove it because you're not on that scale either, and you can't show that here's something as massive as the Earth, and look, it's not attracting all this gas to it. So you see what I mean? You can't do the counter experiment
Oh,
either.
why couldn't I ratio it? Why couldn't I make the same ratio?
What do you mean ratio it?
Make a
Scale it down.
specific mass. Yeah, scale it down to a specific mass ratio.
Because it's so small at that point. If it's done in a laboratory, unfortunately, I know you don't like it when this is said, or well, I don't want to speak for you, sorry. I know that it is often scoffed at in certain groups of people. I don't know if it's this group of people, but when, okay, it's on a small scale. If that gravitational force is very hard to detect at this scale, then
No, your
and
answer
there's so
is that
much else going on.
your answer should be that the Earth's gravitational field is so much stronger that there's no way to isolate away from that. That's what your model's answer is. But anyway, bro, I'm saying even regardless of all this, you should understand the other side's position and then come to your conclusion, which is that the second law of thermodynamics necessitates that entropy will increase in all natural and spontaneous systems, that it would violently and instantaneously fill the available space, and entropy would increase. And therefore, in order to prevent it from filling the available space, which in your model is an infinite, ever-expanding universe of nothingness, then there would have to be some type of physical containment to prevent it from doing that. Now, you may disagree with that conclusion, but you should have already like understood that. Considered it, thought about both sides, weighed it out, and then come to your conclusion. That is the point. That is why I do the exercise, because if you haven't done that, respectfully, I can dismiss your conclusion as invalid.
I do want to say one more thing, and that is when you asked me to do a steel man, I can see two ways now that I think about it. I can see two ways of doing a steel man. The way I did it was, here's how I would argue it to myself to try to convince me that the atmosphere couldn't be held by gravity, that it's not as the globe model says. And there's another way I could do it, and that is that I could try my best to say it the way the people I'm arguing with, say it as close to the way they say it as possible, even if it doesn't make sense to me. So when you say steelman, are you talking about the latter or the former?
I clarified that in this specific scenario, like I'm just talking about the flat Earth position, because every flat earther holds the same position pretty much with this, but it doesn't matter, man. Like your evidence
That's
that
cool.
your evidence that gas couldn't be inside the vacuum was that rockets look like they curve. I mean, each their own. I'm gonna fall back. I made my point pretty clearly, bro. I just encourage you to at least think about what I'm saying and be like, oh well.